Hello, everybody. Leani Lopez here with another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. I'm joined by a fellow exhausted writer. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, I'm Paloma Blue, and I am very, very exhausted today.
Wonderful. Tell us about yourself, Paloma.
Let's see. So Paloma is not my real name. It is my pen name. I work in higher ed. I live in Los Angeles. And when I started canoodling around with the written word a few years ago, I felt it was probably wise to sort of put a little bit of a wall between my day-to-day and my canoodlings. But I've lived in Los Angeles for more than 25 years, which is astounding to me. I work in higher ed. I started writing a little bit after the pandemic, I would say maybe late pandemic. And I was an actor first and then sort of moved into nonprofit development. And now I write in the evenings.
You know, that's the way it goes. You have a bunch of stuff you have to do during the day, and you got to carve out that time to write in the evenings.
Yep.
And what sort of genres do you like? Do you like to stay in one genre? Do you like to bounce around?
I feel pretty bouncy. Right now, I am finishing up historical fiction. So the book that I released last year and the one that I'm working on now are both in the historical fiction, women's fiction genre. I did write screenplays for a while, and those were firmly in the comedy genre. So I like to think of myself as a very angsty writer sometimes. I'm not a romance writer per se. Unfortunately, the happily ever after ending does not live within me. I'm a love story girl right on the angst line. So it's a little bit of everything. I don't feel myself drawn to mystery writing, even though I like mysteries. So I would say it's mostly women's fiction. And then depending on my mood, it's just how I interpret the world. My protagonists tend to be female. I have written from the male POV one time with my previous book. I went back and forth. But for the most part, I would say it's women's fiction with a wide array of emotion.
I hear you. I've focused on women's point of view as well, just because I have more comfort in that point of view. But yeah, I agree with the happily ever after. I'm not a huge happily ever after person. Like, I like an ending that is emotional and makes sense for the characters rather than just like, and everybody was happy, which I enjoy reading. I just don't enjoy writing it.
Yeah, I find that sometimes it feels very tied to the relationship. And sometimes I know there's also the happily for now ending as well. And is the ending when the character's internal arc is finished, right? And sometimes that's in the arms of another human being and sometimes it isn't. And so I felt for me, I just wanted, I'm much more drawn to the ending is when the character comes to a realization or they're not quite the same or they've changed and they've sort of emerged from the chrysalis of where they were before. To me, that feels like the most emotional ending or satisfying way to end something.
Yes, there's got to be a payoff to the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've come across so many stories that were really great, and not just books, but movies and shows. And then they don't stick the landing. Mm-hmm. Like, the ending feels more fan service than what the character would actually do or what the story was, like, leading to. And then you just get sad. You're like, oh, man.
There's nothing wrong with fan service if the fans are coming up with better narratives than the fan. Looking at you,
such a good point.
Unnamed long streaming show.
So, coming from this acting background and screenwriting, what did it feel like when you finished a book? Because that's a completely different medium.
It really felt like playing God. So every frustrated actor wants to direct. Every frustrated director wants to produce. No one wants to write, unless they're a showrunner, in which case they get paid way too much money to write. It was interesting because I actually really liked screenwriting. I was surprised by how much I liked it. A lot of it was because I had a writing partner and our whole mission was to basically crack each other up every week. Like, if
that's fun.
If the pages were good, as long as the other person was hysterically laughing, you had done your job. So it's a much more social way to write in some ways, and it's a good bouncing off. I'm a big bouncing ideas off the wall person, and writers' rooms can be, they can be weird spaces, but they can be joyous spaces because of the constant bouncing. So screenwriting, you're really forced to write visually because you have to tell the story. You have to show the story visually
Yeah.
primarily. And especially now when people are doing the 2-screen thing. But when I wrote the book and I could get in someone's head, and I was like, oh, she's reacting to this thing that happens. So this happens because of the way she reacted to it. And so it gives you much more of a sandbox to play in. And also people's internal motivations really drive the narrative in a way that I think they don't in screenwriting, because screenwriting is really about, the story is almost above the motivations of the characters. Like, yes, there's driving forces in the stories, but it's just different, or it feels different for me writing it. So I felt obviously a sense of accomplishment. I liked it. I liked having a voice that was consistent throughout. It's a more solitary process. It's also, I think, a little harder to find your audience because, or at least for me, because it's such a narrow lane, But I was really proud of it. I mean, the first book that I wrote formed a little oddly. It was actually a series of more standalone stories that sort of got woven together into a longer narrative. And as I was writing them, I thought, oh, this might be something more. The sum of these parts might be greater, right? And also, full disclosure, what really drew me into writing this way was fan fiction. I started writing fan fiction.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people, turned their noses up at writing fan fiction, but how dare you
I
play?
never will. That was my start. That is my writing self-care. We
Mhm.
respect fan fiction in this house.
Well, and it's like, you're playing with someone else's toys, you're playing with someone else's character, but it gives you, it's like training wheels. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's interesting why do fans get so passionate about canon and character? They're like, why do they feel this sense of certainty, right? That no, they would never, Buffy would
Yes.
never, right? And it's just like, well, who owns the character? But, the character resonates differently with different people, right? So there's ways to,
Yes.
and also perhaps I feel a sense of a warm and fuzzy for fan fiction because the women who really created fan fiction were women, right? And who were
Yes.
writing the slash fics between Kirk and Spock in the 70s and 60s and mailing them off to each other. So God bless those women, because those women, scribbled so that we can scroll,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so yeah, I was writing fan fiction, and then so I was a fan of an actor who was in Stranger Things, Joe Quinn, and I was writing different characters. And so when we got cast in Gladiator 2, I was like, fine, I'll write the character there. And then I've always wanted to be a history major, but never was. And, I've always been sort of fascinated by the Roman Empire and Rome in general, because I think there's a lot of parallels to what's happening right now. And I just went to town writing about that world and what would happen if, this very patriarchal society, what would it be like to be a woman in that society and experience the Roman Empire as a woman? And the answer is probably not great, but still, people would fall in love and do things. And so I just became so into that idea, and it just sort of took off from there. That was a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was a perfect answer. It was great because I actually got my first ghostwriting job because I wrote fan fiction.
Interesting.
Because that's literally what you do as a ghostwriter for fiction. You take someone's story and their characters and you write it for them. Like that, ghostwriting.
Yeah.
And writing fan fiction really, I didn't know. I was just doing it because that was my outlet. But it really set the foundation for my ghostwriting career.
Wow.
Which is wild. Yeah.
Okay, don't go to college. Just write a bunch of fan fiction and the magic will happen.
Yeah, I did both, but yeah, that was very, very expensive degree that I'm still paying for.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was fan fiction that at least got me my first interview.
Well, that's
which
great.
Is wild. And it really, it's so funny that you said like being inspired by an actor because
Hmm.
3 of my major projects of my indie author career were based on fanfics. And at least that's where the idea came from. And then as I was developing it, it turned into something greater where I was like, oh, this is much bigger. This is much bigger than that. You never know what's going to be inspiring to you. You never know what story or what actor
Hmm.
or what media is going to spark that imagination, which is why I will never turn my nose down at fan fiction because it
Hmm.
really is a great motivator. It's a great writing practice, and it's just fun. It's just people having fun.
And what's interesting too is that in Hollywood, and I don't know, I can only speak to my experience from a long time ago, but people would write things on spec and they would write them for specific actors, right? So your job was to try and find the actor's voice and persona and put it in your story and then try to sell that story to your actor's production company. I mean, that is just a thing that people do. So everybody was writing, everybody had a script for Tom Cruise. Everybody had a script for, I had a script for Sandy Bullock actually. And it was just, that's the job, right? You're on this show, you're a new writer on a show, there's 4 seasons, go watch them all. And now you got to pick up the voice for this character. So you have to take that mantle and put it on for someone else. And so I won't say fan fiction is exactly the same. It's not, but I think people take that very seriously where they're like, well, so and so, I love this character. This character speaks to me. I think it's an amazing arc. It's brilliant how they wrote this. I want to write this. I want to explore more. I want to see more what happens when they went into that room. And then you
Yeah.
go and you write it. I think it's, some writers have I know some showrunners and some creators don't like fan fiction, but some do. Some, I think, understand that it is in some ways a sense of appreciation, that people are trying to express their own creativity and process their own feelings about the characters in their own way. And I think it's great.
Yes, yes, well put. So, when you were working on this book, I know you were talking about diving into this character and you getting all this insight that you don't necessarily get when you're writing a script.
Mm-hmm.
When you finished the book and you were like, "Okay, I have this book."
Mm-hmm.
Were you just like, "What do I do now?"
Oh God. Then the suck begins because you have to
Yeah.
market the book, and it is so awful because you're in this wonderful headspace, right? Where you're in your thoughts and you've created this world and you've done the homework, and it really is my family was joking. They're like, "Why are you writing history papers for fun? You are so bizarre." And I'm it's a history paper, but like there's angst in it. And, you're in this great headspace. And then it's like you land it out there and you think everybody thinks they're going to throw it up on Amazon and it's going to
Yeah.
happen. It's like so not going to happen. So yeah, I worked with a platform called Readsy, which was really helpful because I found a bunch of different people that helped me with different stages of the book. And I had a little bit of a marketing meet. I had a guy who helped me out with like a preliminary indie marketing plan and gave me all these things to do, which is to try to have like a release party or to have the different platforms and to, the importance of all the, having an author website and a newsletter, which I'm like, God, I have no time. That's the hard thing too, when you work a full-time job and you come home and you're just drained of energy
Yeah.
and creativity. And it's just really hard. Sometimes people, you might ask, what's your process like? And like, well, to the outsider, my process looks a lot like goofing off, but it's really about like recharging that creative, it might look like watching YouTube videos and having 17 screens open, but I promise you there is a cognitive thought process
There's
happening.
a reason why I'm doing these things.
I am watching tiny houses for a reason, but yeah, the marketing piece took over. And then I spent a lot of time, working on creating a website and Google keywords, which are evil. And then AI, oh, so helpfully trying to prompt me to sell. And you can just spend money. I mean, it's like opening a window and throwing dollars out, like,
Yeah.
another $100 for, and you get all the, you get everybody to come to your website, but then the conversions don't happen. And then it's like, well, is your book price too high? Or, are you in the marketplace? Is your book, what are your comparable specs? And it's like a whole other world of selling. And I went through this as an actor where I'm trying to sell myself. And then I went through this as a screenwriter where you're like trying to sell, at least you're selling the script, here's the work, don't
Yeah.
look at me, right? And then it's like now you have to even go further, and it was very tiring, honestly, and overwhelming, and I might have whiffed it a little bit. And ultimately you come down to writing for yourself. And I'm in the process of editing my second book, and I learned a lot from writing the first book. I mean, you hate to think that something you spent a year on is something that you is like a training, learning or training yourself,
Yeah.
but you learn. And the process for this one was a little faster and a little bit more streamlined for me. And I've lost my train of thought just a little bit, but how I felt overwhelmed with the marketing. And I think ultimately my realization is this a hobby? Is this a vocation? Is this something I'm going to do until I'm too old to write anymore? Probably, because at least you don't have to, you can, writing is something, it's like golf. You can write until you're
Yeah.
95, right? And I just really like telling, I think ultimately I want to tell the stories that I want to read, right? Like if I'm not finding that story out there in the marketplace, I want to tell it. And so I
Yeah.
feel a sense of accomplishment for telling the story I wanted to tell. And then I feel a sense of dismay at the possibility of getting that story out into the universe.
Writing the story that you want to read is such a big part of it. And I think that can get lost sometimes just in the, like you were saying, overwhelming nature of having to market and having to, you know, do something with the story now that it's done. And, you've got this story, and like you said, it took like a year of your life, and you poured all of this energy and emotion into it. And then you have to be like, hey, can somebody read this?
Yeah, and it's interesting too because why that it was interesting. It was like a bunch of things sort of dovetailed. So I was interested. I've said this before in other interviews, but like Gladiator was my one of my favorite movies of all time, and then Gladiator 2, so not. It was like I've written two books about the two emperors. The Gladiator, the first one, the Saturnalia Queen, focuses on Caracalla, and this one, the one that's coming up, Empress in Exile, will focus more on Gaeta. And yeah, at the end of the day, you just have to hope that someone attaches onto the feelings that that you wanted to convey in the story. And ultimately, I think something is lost when people are trying to write to market. I think if you're a very established writer and you're John Grisham, right, and he writes great books and he knows what he's doing, he's got that muscle memory. Michael Connolly, they've got the muscle memory. They can sit down and they can drop a book a year. I mean, I don't know how Michael Connolly does it. The man is a machine, and they're good. They're because he knows his audience. He knows his sandbox. He knows what he's doing, and it's great. But for a lot of people, they're like, oh, this sold, therefore dragons are, therefore I should make a dragon. And it's like, just tell the story that you want to tell. And now with AI adding this whole extra horrible layer on everything, it's like, God, the world needs more weird. Okay. Be weird, be cringe,
Yes.
just be stupid and write your dumb, write your book about your agnostic witch who loves frogs and wants to have a school for frog catchers. Who cares? Just write it because it makes you
Yeah.
happy and it makes you human. And some human out there will read that or come across that book and read it and be like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one, and there's that sense of human connection, which is harder and harder to find. I won't apologize for putting all the cringy words down on paper. And also too, a lot of people go through there's a lot to process right now, and we're bombarded with information all the time, and writing is therapeutic. Take those feelings and write them down. Put your characters through it. It will make you feel better about what you're going through. I firmly believe there's a reason why they want people to write things in therapeutic situations, why the artist's way is so popular. There's a way of conveying those words out on paper that helps bring those emotions out and helps you process things.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the major things that people who use AI are not understanding because they're looking at just the end product. And they're like, well, why don't you just use AI? Then it'll write the book for you. And it's like, no, the whole point of writing the book is to write the book. It's about the journey, not the destination.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about like, yeah, I just have a book, here it is. It's like, no, I had this story, I had this idea, I want to go on this journey with these characters and see what happens. And you can't do that through AI because you're not actually writing, you're not honing your skills, you're not learning as you go. So that also means you're not improving. You're just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, here's this story. And I mean, what you were saying of like going through it and wanting to know more and wanting to develop it yourself, I think one of the main reasons my current book has taken me so long to get through is because when I had the initial idea back in 2016, almost 10 years now, so back in
Wow.
2016, I emotionally was not ready to take on that character. I didn't
Mm.
have the maturity I have now to do that character justice. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until about 2 years ago that I reworked the book and I finally connected with the character because I was new to my craft then. Even though I had been writing since childhood and I had gone to college, I hadn't written as much as I've written now as a ghostwriter. I've written, I honestly have lost track of how many books I've written. Under
Wow.
my own name, there are two, but as a ghostwriter, I stopped counting at 20.
Wow. Wow.
So even though those are something separate and they're completely different genres from what I normally write, I have 20 books worth of experience now to take to my own work. And I wouldn't have had that if I just ran it through AI or, didn't allow myself to explore these really messy characters. And now I finally did finish drafting this book at the end of last year. And
Hmm.
it's way more meaningful now than it would have been if I had attempted to do it back then.
Amazing. I mean, the thing is, do you ever go through this feeling where the book starts to write itself?
Yeah.
And I actually lost time yesterday. I was writing something, and it tends to happen with me more with the comedy than with the historical fiction, but where, especially there are times where you're just channeling. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes, I literally brought that up like the last interview I just did.
Hmm.
It really feels like you're just sitting there and the words are being poured into your head from like an ether pitcher. Like, oh, here
That
you go.
that sense of flow. I mean, for
Mhm.
me, the older I get, the more I feel like the whole world, it's friction and flow, right? And the state of flow is so rare to find. But when you're in flow and you lose time and you're in a creative space and you're sort of aware, but you're doing the work, the words are coming, the music is coming, the art, the brush is moving or whatever it is. It's this magical feeling of like mastery and surrender at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And if you're using AI, if you're just pressing a button and telling AI, write a story, watch this movie and then write a story, about the two girls that these guys dated, right? And it regurgitates something. It's like you don't learn anything, you don't grow, you don't get to achieve that space of creativity, which is like the purpose of, like you said, the whole point of writing the book is to actually write the book. But you don't
Yes.
grow as a human, let alone as a writer, if you don't put yourself in those positions where, and also your 20 ghostwriting books, the muscle memory,
Yes.
write
Yes.
all the
It's
time.
muscle memory now. Yeah. It really is automatic writing.
Yep, yep. And they tell you, write every day. And sometimes that's not possible, and
Hmm.
sometimes write every weekend, when you're a working person, you just got to find the time or write consistently and find your rhythm and find your space. And sometimes, the ideas will hit you at a very bad time and you hope that you can remember them. But, it's just look, I understand AI is not going away, and we're going to have to figure out a way to work with it. But I think we don't want to lose our own voice, because when we're trying to write to what someone's expectations are of what we should write, when we're trying to, write to the market, or if we just surrender and say, I'm just going to have AI help me, we're shortchanging ourselves more than anything else.
Yeah, and not only shortchanging yourself, but you're not developing your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things, because I'm an author coach as well, and one of the things people bring up to me all the time, even if they aren't my clients, just I've always heard from multiple people many times a year, just, I've always wanted to write, but I had this idea and I feel like it's been done already. And I'm like, okay, well, probably, because there have been billions of people. But at the same time, your perspective is what's going to make the story, not the idea necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
because your ideas and your perspective is not the same from the other person who had a similar story. You're going to have a different spin on it. You're going to pick different themes. Different things are
Mm-hmm.
going to resonate with you. So if you boil down the idea, like Buffy, like girl slays monsters.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
many stories have been girl slay monsters?
Not enough.
Not enough. We need more.
Mm.
But what matters is the person writing them, and just what you do with the story and your own voice. And by not writing or by shortchanging yourself, you're kind of cutting off your own voice.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because when I was acting, we used to talk about, there's this thing called the method, right? Which is, you're supposed to mime your own emotion and your own memories to convey. You're supposed to think of like the terrible thing that happened to you and that gets you to cry in the moment. I'm very much butchering what it is, and all due respect to people. I mean, it works for some actors and not for others. But the idea, we used to come up in conversation, and and where you are in the journey in relation to that memory affects how you tap into that memory, right? So
Yeah.
say it's very raw the first time you touch that memory, and the 17th time you touch that memory it's not so raw. And in some ways it's like desensitization therapy too. It's like you go through the terrible memory enough times that the terrible memory doesn't own you or control you. So
Yeah.
if the same people are telling the same story, if different people are telling the same story, how they're approaching that story, their worldview from where they are and how they lived it in the moment, but all the history that they bring into that moment from their previous and where they're going affects that story in that moment. And that is the thing that no one can replicate. And that is valuable. You want to make your mark on the world, right? You want to use your voice to tell your story. So even if you want to tell a murder mystery, husband kills wife and tries to get away with it, but tell it from your perspective and think about all the things that you knew bringing into the story, and where you're going after that is just going to make it so unique to you that the world is better off if you tell the story, no matter how poorly written it is. It's still a better place because you wrote it.
Yeah. And you can always edit.
Yes,
you
you
know,
can.
Yeah, I know. My main piece of advice when I'm coaching is you can't edit a blank page. And it's funny because people are always like, oh my God, the editing process. And I get it, it's exhausting. But for me, the hardest part is the blank page. Once
Mm.
I have something on the page, I'm like, oh, thank God I have something to work with.
So do you
But
find that it's hard to start, or do you hit like blocks in the middle?
I hit blocks in the middle because usually when I am working on a story, it's because I had very specific scenes
Hmm.
that drew me in. And so what I do, and was actually encouraged to do this by my ghostwriting client, is I will write those scenes, and then if there's like a transition, I'll just put parentheses and be like, transition here, and I will move on. And I will write all the scenes that are in my head just to get them out and on paper. And most of the time, my blocks come when I'm not doing it that way, when I'm
Interesting.
trying to write it linearly. because sometimes my brain is like, I don't want to think about it that way.
That's so interesting. So I had an outline for this most recent book because I'm writing about someone who actually existed in history. So I had a very broad outline of her life basically. And I knew I had a scene that I wanted, like you. I had it in my head, but rather than I didn't write it first. I would be like, no, I got to get there. As soon as I get to Sicily, it's all gonna come together. But I got to get her there, and then I can't figure out how she gets there. But eventually, you sort of hammer your way through. So that's interesting that you would just give yourself permission to have dessert before dinner, right? You write Sicily, you write that scene first, and then go back.
Yeah, because sometimes once the scenes are out of my head, I don't have to think about them anymore. It's just like moving files on the computer. Like, okay,
Okay.
cool, it's off. If it's off on the external hard drive, so I freed up some space.
Do you edit as you go, or do you sort of free write and then go back and do a big, you know?
I edit as I go.
Okay, yeah, same.
Well, I have to for ghostwriting, otherwise I'll never get anything done. And
Okay.
also for ghostwriting, I send progress reports to the client, which is just basically the document that I'm working on. And so I learned a long time ago, at least just with who I work with, that writing chunks of chapters and then editing them and then moving on to the next chunk of chapters just helped keep the story going.
Hmm.
And now I just naturally do that. So I'll write a good chunk of chapters, go back, clean it up a little bit, flesh stuff out, and then I'll go on to the next chunk of chapters. And then I'll do the same thing and I'll go back and I'll read that chunk of chapters. And then when I get about halfway through, that's when I'll go back to the beginning and reread them through before I start on the second half of the book.
Yeah, that's interesting. I tend to do go. I edit as I go, and I'll go back and start over. And it's interesting leaving it alone for a while. I had it with an editor for a month, and then I come back, and it's just amazing how that time away from it allows you to see it with fresh eyes. Not entirely fresh, but fresh enough that you'll be like, oh, that doesn't work, or oh, this. Wow. Okay. I mean, I'm very grumpy on the days that the block, right? And I don't know what it is, but there is something about water that, like, the ideas always pop into my head when I'm like washing dishes or brushing my teeth. There's something about water or being, shower thoughts, as they say, where it's just like, oh, of course. Oh, duh. They get on the boat. And it's just like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, I can't wait till I have time to write. That's about 4 days from now. But the idea is strong enough that it stays in your head. It's interesting too because I find that I get what I call monkey brain so often, especially at work, where I'm just, inundated with so much input all day, right? And then, I've become one of those people that, 10, 15 years ago, I would make fun of, but like, I don't watch the news anymore because I'm like, I just don't have space for more input.
Yeah, same.
And it just gets me so angry, or I just you just feel the sense of, all you can do are the small things that you can control. I think when you get older, you learn what you can control and what you can't control, right? And what you can control are your reactions to things, and the actions that you can take personally. And to preserve that creative headspace for myself, I really have to be very valuable with, or very judicious with what I put into my brain in my personal time, because otherwise I'm just not in a good headspace. And if I'm not in a good headspace, I can't. I know we were joking about spite, but I really have to be in a very positive mindset to be creative. I have a very hard time. Like, I could never write the angry breakup song, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely agree because when I'm doing ghostwriting, that's all literally just rom coms and there's spice, which is fine. I like writing spice. Yeah, and I write spice in my own work, but there are times that I'm just like, I don't want to write a spicy scene right now. I'm actually kind of grumpy. Like, I'm just gonna skip that and move on to like the angst of the story because that's what I feel like writing right now.
It's so fun to write. I don't understand. It's just,
It is fun. I love angst. I love banter. My client really encouraged that early on. She was just like, I love the way you write banter and I want you to write more of it. And I was like, okay. Say
my
less.
idols are Nora Ephron and Carrie Fisher, and they were script doctor. Obviously wrote actual screenplays, in particular Nora, but the doctoring, just the witty, comebacks and all that. Like that's just, I love that. That was the job I really wanted in Hollywood, was to be a script doctor and be like, let me just bring in the sarcastic chick with the glasses, and she's just gonna punch this up.
Well, since this is a writing advice podcast, I like to ask my guests, what is the best or worst piece of writing advice you've ever received?
Since a lot of the most writing training I've had was for screenplays, I have brought a lot of that over into novel writing, for better or for worse, right? Start in the middle was always one that we heard. It's just drop into the action. In the old days, it was once upon a time. There's no time. You'll lose your audience. You have to be, this man is running. Why is he running? Why is somebody shooting at him? I think of, what's a great example of this is the very beginning of that Disney movie, Ratatouille, where there's a rat, crashing through a window and someone's chasing him and it freezes. Like, this is me. You're probably wondering how I got here. It's like immediately you're in action. So cut to the chase, right? So that was a great piece of advice. And then in novel writing, I got a great note from an editor who said, okay, but time has to move forward in a novel or it's confusing for the reader. So I had this habit of boomeranging, right? Where I would be like, I am here reminiscing about what just happened. Then I jump back to what happened and then I boomerang back. And in a book, you have to really start where the thing happens, right? And move forward in your chronology. So that was a good piece of screenwriting advice that was a lousy piece of regular writing advice. That makes sense. Because it's a different medium. It's a different medium. But I do believe in starting in the middle. I do believe in brevity. I'm an atmospheric writer. I've received that feedback, which is great. It's just how I tend to write things. I think because, again, the medium that I'm writing in this particular genre of book lends itself to that. But I'm a big fan of spare writing. I actually Bret Easton Ellis, I think, is a great example of someone who is so spare with his words, but paints such a picture. It's the space between the words that fills the world. Less is more. I'm a big white space, less is more on the page type person. It's almost like an aesthetic, if you will. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And this is another reason why I have a problem personally with AI writing, is it tends to throw all the words. And it's like the through line, finding the through line of what you're saying and trying to say it with as few words as possible takes discipline and practice. So that's something that I try to aspire to. And even though if you read my work, you probably don't see it, but it's something I'm going for.
I've been working on my current book for a while now, and I finally got some constructive feedback. And it was stuff that I could tell what was, quote, I'm not going to say, well, it wasn't wrong with it, but I could tell what I needed to work on. I just couldn't verbalize it. And it was the less is more. It was the holding back a little bit from the readers and not necessarily being so hand-holdy. Like, let them come to the subtext themselves and things like that. And as you were talking, speaking of writing advice, I suddenly know why that's a thing. And it's because when I was writing in college, I'm also a big fan of dropping you in the action. Like, this is what's happening there. This is the dynamic with the characters, and you learn the backstory as you go. And that's how I wrote my first book. And the professor was like, you should probably start earlier in her childhood. And that was probably the worst piece of writing advice I've ever received, because it was important to her, but it wasn't important to the story. So
right.
Trying to balance those two with the less is more is so hard. Writing is so hard.
It's interesting because also too, we all have consumed so much media and so many stories. And so there's a shorthand, I think, almost that doesn't exist or didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, especially in visual media. But, there's framing devices and sometimes too many framing devices. There's a letter and then there's a this and it's like no, just tell the story from beginning to end, right? But also the analogy that I have is like if you're throwing a party or a wedding or you're some big event, so often you're so stuck in your point of view of like, okay, I need things to go here. And you're like, no, you got to walk it like your guest. What is your guest experiencing when they get out of the car and they're trying to find the venue, and what is the temperature like and how are they greeted and how do they know where to navigate and all these things. You have to turn it, you have to flip it and see it from the outsider's perspective and realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that there's no way they would find the room without a sign, right? So when you're writing your story, you have to remember that you have the omniscient, everybody, what everyone's thinking, what everyone's doing. And it's so hard especially when you're excited about your characters and you want to think about, well, the person that's reading this has no clue. They're coming in and, you have to grab your reader, but your reader needs to know what planet they're on, right? Like, it's a little confusing if you don't name, and no, literally. And exposition wise too, it's like everyone hates exposition. But how can you be creative and clever with how you give the reader enough background that they can go, oh, okay, I'm on Mars, and oh, gotcha, okay, I'm with you.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And so it's an art form. Like I said, it takes practice. It's not easy, but it's fun if you get it right.
I mean, like you just said, it's not easy, and I feel like people who don't write, for some reason, think it is.
Well, isn't that the way it always is, though? Like, that looks easy. I could do that.
Oh my gosh. Yes, the number of times I've had people be like, yeah, I'm sure I could do that. And I'm just like, I know you as a person. No, you cannot. You do not have the stamina or brain power for this. So it's just, you have to have so many different hats on as a writer. Especially like for you, for the historical fiction, now you have a whole other level that you have to include in your writing.
You have to hire historians. And again, with my disgruntled worldview about the whole Gladiator universe, I found 2 disgruntled historians who were very disgruntled about the Barbarian universe on Netflix, and literally dedicated a YouTube channel to how historically inaccurate season 2 was, because they had worked on season 1. And I was like, you guys are perfect. Let's connect. But, going back to what you were saying about everybody thinks they can do it, you really get your mom badge with 2, right? That's the joke, right? Like everybody can have 1 kid, but you really get your mom badge with 2. I think when you have more than 1 script in a drawer, when you have more than 1 book, people are like, oh, wow, you're serious about this, huh? Like, it's not just I just want to see if I can do it kind of thing. It's like, oh, wow, you have more than 1 of them. Huh. And it's true because each one hopefully builds upon the last one. So that's the thinking. Just write the story, tell the story you want to tell. Tell the story you want to tell, because we need stories. Stories are how we have always interpreted and made sense of the world. We need more human stories, especially now.
Well, on that note, Paloma, thank you so much for joining me. We could probably keep talking for hours.
We could. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If I may, just a quick plug.
Oh, yeah. Where can people find you?
Where can they find? They can find me at palomablue.net and look. So my first book, The Saturnalia Queen, is out now. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on other, Barnes & Noble and other bookstores. And my second book, Empress in Exile, is hoping to drop sometime in summer. And it is the second piece of the duology of the 2 Roman emperors, Caracalla and Gaeta, and the women who love them, I guess, is what I don't know. I'm not doing it justice. But it's been a really great process. And after that, I'm probably going to leave the Roman Empire behind and move into more of a future forward universe.
And I will put the link to your website in the description. So if you're listening, check the description and you can follow Paloma anywhere. This is a reminder that I do have a Patreon. Patrons receive episodes up to 2 days earlier than the general public. There are exclusive blogs and podcast episodes that are only found on Patreon. You'll also receive discounts on writing services, behind-the-scenes tidbits for Battle Cry, including access to our blooper reel, access to my Discord server,
and shout outs in future podcast episodes. So head over to patreon.com/Leani M. Lopez or check out the link in the description.
And on that note, thank you so much, Paloma, and thank you to everybody for listening. As always, happy writing.